This will be my video on the 2023 Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Poor Things. I'm going to start with a review that's not going to spoil the movie or anything else, and then after that, and I'll verbally let you know when we get there, I will get into what I call the thoughts section of the video, where I will spoil everything about the movie, possibly not in chronological order or anything. And the movie is rated R, so will this video be. And this is a movie where there's definitely things I love about it, but there's also some that I take issue with. Now, since it is Disability Pride Month, I did want to do at least part of this video I intend to be a disability reading of the film. I think essentially all of that is going to be in the thoughts section. So, before I proceed, I did want to say that I really recommend the various video essays I've watched on the film. Uh, I definitely remember one by The Take, one by Khadija Mbawe. I feel like I watched one that was by Broe Deschanel, but it didn't show up when I did a quick YouTube search. Maybe it's on Nebula, I forget. I feel like I've watched others. I am linking to one that covers multiple Yorgos Lanthimos movies in the description box, unless I forget, in which case please remind me in the comment section. But the, did I already say in the description box? Okay, here we go. And, yeah. I also wanted to note that I am gonna base everything I say in the video that is about a minority group that I do not belong to, which is pretty much all of them. I guess really I don't know, arguably, do I qualify as partially physically disabled by now with all this physical pain? I need to figure that out. Anyway, yeah, I base what I say on issues that I bring up in my videos, yeah, that are about minority groups to which I do not belong myself, on what I've heard from members of those communities, particularly leftist members, and there is a link in the description box to a Google Doc that has, as of yet, it's still a work in progress, but I'm trying to make sure it contains every one that I feel I've learned a lot from. That, yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna try my best to not restate here something that I've heard someone else say, like directly. I'll try to apply ideas within analysis, but not direct observations, except for maybe ones that are so general within analysis of it by now. But yeah, if I do mess up and accidentally simply say something someone else has, I swear I'm not doing it on purpose. And I'm pretty sure it's never happened with, let's see, the how do I best phrase this? I feel fairly confident that I'm not going to do so with someone who has a smaller platform than I. And yeah, even so, I appreciate it's, members of minority groups have a harder time getting positive attention than a lot of cishet white men. Now, I think that does pretty well cover. Right, I guess I should also say I don't know if I'm going to be able to bring that much new to this discussion. I'll try. And I feel like that does cover. Yeah, so getting directly into it, I finished watching this earlier today. I can't imagine that this would have been a wonderful, cinema trip. And maybe at some point I will watch one of his movies in theaters. This, I guess, is a good time to briefly note. So, I am a little late to the Yorgos Lanthimos, to discovering him. But other than this, I'm trying to keep to chronological order. We'll see how long that lasts. But the other ones I've watched are Dogtooth, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and The Favorite. And this is probably the first one where I can't completely say that I love it. And with that said, there are definitely a number of things I do. Right, I guess I did already say that. Yeah. Anyway, the writing. So I'm only going to give a very vague idea of the setup here because I think it's a movie that is good to not know too much about. But it is essentially a sort of coming of age. It's essentially more a metaphorical approach to that. There are a number of much more literal within the subgenre. And there is one particular aspect of it that has drawn a lot of fair criticism. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to know more, it's not very difficult to find out. A lot of people will come right out and tell you what the core concept is. And yeah, moving on. So setup and payoff is very, very strong here. There are so many things here where they will have something that, by the end of it, you get how, why was it there? What did it add? And yeah, there were multiple times where I was surprised by how something came back. And let's see, yeah, tension and suspense, it's not exactly like it's essentially these social interactions and certain circumstance that it comes from, but it is not, it is not necessarily it's not necessarily like danger of physical harm as much as films of equal degree of tension and suspense. And yeah, so it definitely is interesting when it comes to the element of psychological accuracy, because there are places where it is definitely going for that, and then there are times where it's clearly exaggerating for effect. I am still not 100% sure if what I'm about to say is a Danish saying. We have it here in Denmark, but I don't know. I'm not sure I offhand recall hearing it from someone who isn't Danish, but at least here in Denmark, we have a saying that exaggeration increases understanding. And Yorgos Lanthimos appears to agree with that. It is a movie that always stays true to itself. It never feels like it's compromising. It is not particularly realistic. It takes elements from reality. And that, once again, very clearly quite purposeful. The level of detail is immense. And honestly, the production alone, like if you can get past the elements of this that are problematic, then just for that aspect alone, it is well worth watching at least once. And yeah, as usual, tonally, Lanthimos, right? And to be clear, I'm also I'm not that familiar with the other with all of the other people who had a lot of influence over how these films came out. I am not trying to do the whole auteur theory. I appreciate that movies are made by many people. It's not just the director. But I've definitely noticed in Lanthimos' movies, and maybe it's him, maybe it's others he worked with, but there is this, when it comes to tone, sometimes it will be very serious and other times very silly. And I personally think it works well. The contrast is quite effective in really underlining certain things. And I definitely do think it seeks to explore its concept to the full extent. And I'm going to discuss some in the thought section why I don't think it gets there 100%. And I am aware that this is based on a book. I have not read it. I believe there are, others who were familiar with both of these versions of Poor Things that have made comparisons. I do know the ending, and I will discuss the ending in comparison to the movie's ending in the thought section. Now, yeah, so the dialogue, I have long really liked, as long as I've been familiar with Lanthimos' work, I've really, really liked how he handles dialogue right from Dogtooth. And this, in some ways, is my favorite because he is, there is such appreciation here. And again, I don't know if it comes from him or who exactly, but there is such appreciation here of what you can actually do with language. And yeah, the very particular ways people talk, what they say, when they say it, and what they expect the outcome to be, or whether or not they even consider that, is crucial to, like, you can learn so much from the characters by paying close attention to those aspects. And yeah, the direction continues to be quite strong. I never felt like it was getting out of his hands. Once again, there are definitely things here to criticize. And I think that definitely, let's see how to best phrase this. So basically, I do think a lot of the criticisms should be directed towards him because it does feel like these are his ideas and approaches to the ideas and such. And yeah. The cinematography, I think, is my favorite so far of his. In my opinion, he is just getting better and better as these go, and I was already very fond of the use of the fisheye lens in The Favorite. Here, like, just, yeah, I'm fairly confident it's used more, and from what I recall, there was not very much movement of the fisheye lens camera in that. Here there is at least some more, and just like nothing looks quite like it. So far, I don't know that I've ever watched any movie that looks and feels just like a Yorgos Lanthimos movies, and that really includes his other movies, frankly. And the editing is also great. There are some truly delightful smash cuts, and just the way that we get from one scene to another. And yeah, I don't know that I've ever been bored for a single frame of a Lanthimos movie. I mean, even if you only look at the visuals, and obviously there's other stuff as well. So, also big props to production value, set design, locations, costumes, and makeup. They convey things about characters. We get a sense of who someone is based on where they work, how they decorate their living area, what they wear. Yeah, things like this. This is also visually striking in part because of the decision to use so many studio backlots, so many sets, instead of, there's not terribly much as far as locations go, and apparently part of the idea was to evoke old Hollywood, which fits incredibly well for at least one significant reason that I will talk about in the thought section, unless I forget. And the yeah, it adds to the way that, I mean, in some ways it almost feels like a fairy tale, and that's not a spoiler because that's evident from the very start of this. And yeah, like, just watching Lanthimos movies makes me want to watch more stuff that gets so creative and bold with costuming, because like so much of what I watch these days is so mainstream, and part of the reason I watch as much as I do is to be challenged, to feel and think things that I don't, otherwise. And yeah, let's see. I guess that does bring us nicely to the music. So the yeah, I think I may have made the following observation about at least one other Lanthimos movie, but yeah, he does this. So sometimes his movies, the way the score works is that it's fairly simple instrumentation. The it stands in very stark contrast to a lot of other scores where they go for maximalism, and I'm not saying that that's bad for those, but I do not think it would work well for Lanthimos. In part because, like, there's so much going on in the frame, and it could end up overpowering. Certainly some Nolan movies have a maximalist score, and while he will sometimes really pack the frame with detail, his camera is not necessarily always the most compelling. It tends to lie more in writing, in ideas and such. And that's not really a criticism of him. That's stylistic difference between the two. But yeah, like, I would argue, I guess I can only really speak for myself, but personally, every single moment of the score, it clearly had me feeling what I was meant to. The sound design is also great. There are times where it really goes for it, and other times where it is more subtle in ways that I thought really showed that he has put, there was put care and thought into this, even if a case could be made that it's not 100% enough. And yeah, so the characters are part of where we see the social commentary that is one of my favorite aspects of a Lanthimos picture. And I'm not going to give too much away about them, but the acting was absolutely on point, and there was no character that I felt outstayed their welcome. Like, they're not necessarily all ones that we actually find appealing, but they were, what's the word? They're ones that, again, you know what, blanket for the rest of this, everything I say, it's how I feel about it. I was interested in them. And, there are some that are not in it very much. And that also just felt like, well, yeah, there's not necessarily more to say about that person. But over the course of it, we get to know a decent enough number of individuals. And, yeah, just the way they play off each other and react to their various circumstances was just like there's so much care and thought put into, they're so clearly carefully drawn. I have been a fan of Emma Stone for 16 years. Wait, when was? No, I guess it's just 2009. Zombieland 1. I know you don't have to tell me I should watch at least some of the stuff that she did before that. I think I might, at least at some point. And I think this is my favorite performance of hers. Just it's impressive just on how fearless it is. There is no holding back. I never for a second felt like she was self-conscious about anything. I cannot really see Emma Stone in this. I only see the character she portrays. And, yeah, really everyone does well. I was surprised by Mark Ruffalo in this. I've always, I love every performance of his, with the possible exception of 13 going on 30, and that's not really his fault. He does the best with the material he's given. He's supposed to be he's playing an archetype. I wish they had given him more to do, but I'm not gonna talk too much more about that here. But yeah, this might actually also be my favorite performance of his so far. And apparently he was like, at first he was nervous about it, but then he was like, you know what, fuck it, let's just go for it. And he did, and it absolutely paid off big time. I think that might be about, well, yeah. I mean, if you still need to hear the words, Willem Dafoe does an amazing job, I don't know, watch a movie of his, I guess, so you'll know. Yeah, so the pacing, it never felt like it meandered or was rushing, and it definitely does carefully vary over the course of it. I will say, like The Favorite, it definitely, I mean, none of the four of these are for everyone, but, if you want something where the pacing is more likely to be, to a bit more mainstream sensibility liking, I would probably say either Dogtooth or Sacred Deer are closer than these two. Yeah, I continue to really appreciate the way Lanthimos challenges himself. There are similarities between these four films, but none of them feel like, oh, he's just doing that again. And, I just realized, I think I sped through cinematography too fast. I mentioned the fisheye lens. In general, the lensing is fantastic. The choice of angles, when to move the camera, how to move the camera, the lighting, like every step of the way. The decisions made with color are worth studying in college courses. Now, that does bring us to... I'm not going to give too many details, but there definitely are some effects and stunts here that are also very impressive, and there's neither too much or too little of it. And yeah, so essentially the movie, I don't think I want to give away every genre that this fits into. I will say, as a fan of each of them, I was more or less satisfied with what it did with the different elements. And the two I feel confident mentioning, drama and comedy, are both quite strong in the quality, variety, and delivery of the elements that we expect therein. It is very much a comedy where we never know, like, yeah, one of the things is we never know exactly when the next joke is coming, because not everything in, yeah, I already mentioned drama and comedy, not everything is funny in it. But yeah, you also never quite can say for sure what kind of joke. And is it going to be a very innocent one or an incredibly dark one? And once again, I feel this contrast really helps to clarify certain things, and especially when, like, sometimes it'll go between a joke that, you know, yeah, as mentioned, innocent essentially, and then show something really shocking that isn't funny and isn't meant to be. And yeah, because of that, like, the latter hits so much harder than if it was consistently that. So there, yeah, I will discuss in detail at least some of the way the movie uses the R-rated elements. What I'll say for now, without spoilers, it definitely is a movie that would have looked completely different if it was not R-rated. And I don't think that Lanthimos thinks that any of the R-rated elements here exists for no purpose at all. And I'll discuss that in the thought section as well. Yeah. So this is one of those where I'm going to have to give 2 ratings. So if we are talking, is the movie, did it make me feel, think, am I going to remember it for a long time? Did it challenge and provoke me? Yeah, it's an 8 out of 10. But if we are going off, is it as responsible as I would love it to be about some very sensitive topics? It's either half or maybe only even a quarter of that rating. And with that, let's get into... Oh, right. And as far as overall movie quality, in some ways, the Lanthimos movies just get better and better. I already mentioned the ones I'm going off of. So, let's talk about the thoughts that I had watching this. So, I already mentioned at the start, I might talk about the ending early on. In fact, I think I'm going to briefly go over the way the ending compares to what I've heard described of the book ending, because I do think it changes a lot about the movie. I knew the book ending. I knew a lot of spoilers going into this movie, and it didn't really negatively affect my experience. Now, in the book, the very end reveals that Bella did not go through this fantastical notion of, a baby's brain Frankensteined into, I was going to make that reference at some point in this video, into the body of an adult woman, the mother of the baby, in fact. Rather, that was something made up, if I recall correctly, by Max, so that, you know, that was sort of his way of rationalizing and justifying certain things. And yeah, I mean, I'll just briefly quote, I'm afraid I forget who, but this is look-upable, it's Googleable. The way that the movie ending is framed. You know, so yeah, someone pointed out, so is Bella a girl boss now? Like, what is this, you know? And I have to admit, I don't really understand why Lanthimos did not incorporate the original ending, because I think it would have been just about perfect. I think it would have saved some of the elements that instead end up feeling, yeah. Because so yeah, basically, like, what we end the movie with is that she does to others what was done to her. She takes over the young woman, and she puts the, let's see, I believe it's the brain of a sheep into perhaps Meryl Sheep, which is apparently the nickname of one of the, yeah, the sheep, or the sheep, was there more than one? Used on set, if I understand correctly. Anyway, into the brain of Mr. Military. And I don't know, if I think I have an idea of what his character's name is, but I feel Mr. Military kind of, like, he is the military, you know, if the military were a person, that's who. Yeah. And I can't defend it from an ethical standpoint. I'm not going to pretend like I don't think it is an upgrade, as Bella put it. He was behaving as an animal before, and I do appreciate, you know, really bringing that point home. Like, they don't even, nobody says the word, he was an animal before, he's an animal now, but that's clearly what is, in my opinion, being conveyed here. And yeah, like, the way he was, yeah, he had no empathy for this woman that he kept claiming to love. And one of the things about the ending, I appreciate that Bella kept around her fellow socialist. And the thing about she's going to become a doctor. However, we hardly see any of the socialism, which, like, I'm sorry, I feel like at least some of the sex could have been replaced with, like, they talk about going to a socialist meeting, and I do appreciate the point made about in the dialogue, which I think I'll just get to when I'll get to, but the yeah, I think there could have been more. And this is also decent enough time for me to note, I am not a prude. I am just someone who feels that if there's going to be a lot of sex in something that is not porn, then there should always be something being accomplished, communicated. And I'm not, it doesn't have to further the plot. I remember seeing someone say, how could it further the plot? Pregnancy, showing that two people are taking their relationship to the next level. What a silly question. Sorry. I swear, I'm trying not to do those. It's just, I don't even understand. Like, listen, if you don't like sex scenes, just say you don't like sex scenes. I hate bad arguments. I hate them. Anyway, moving on. If it communicates something, then by all means, you know, have on-screen sex. I won't even look up from my typewriter. Well, maybe once. However, for a quick example, there are some who would say that there's too much sex and or it's too casual in Marvel Netflix Marvel Defenders verse. I disagree. In my opinion, every single scene where there is some kind of sexuality, there is a reason for it. We might not always like what it says about one or more characters, but I would personally argue there's always something. And then in this, just, yeah, the fact that there are two consenting adult actors, not to be confused with adult actors, yeah, like, it doesn't bother me, and I am 99% sure that those two, like, teenagers, tweens, were not actually present during nudity. That was just carefully edited to make it appear that they saw something. But at the end of the day, for all the movie wants to say about misogyny, this does feel very much like a cishet man's idea of what a woman's experience in the world is. Because when you listen to female feminists, as you should, you will find that they have quite a lot on their mind that has nothing to do with sex. However, a lot of men, even ones who are trying not to be misogynistic, they have this thing where they tend to view women in a sexual light. Essentially, over the course of the movie, we have Godwin feeling paternalistically, at times patronizingly, towards Bella and suppressing those feelings for the Margot Qualley character. We have the various men who want to have sex with her. Some are content to do it once, whether or not she wants it. Some of them at least say that they only want it when she wants it. And then you have Mr. Military, who does not want her to experience any sexual pleasure, but does want her pregnant. And while those do reflect well how a lot of men perceive women, the fact is a lot of this is told from Bella's point of view. Like, an argument could be made that essentially everything... let's see, there's hardly any scenes that don't feature her, And we're seeing her view of the world. That's why the colors change. That's why it's black and white when she is stuck with Godwin and like at times Max will challenge ideas, but she kind of just is supposed to repeat and believe what Godwin does. And yeah, over the course of by the end, the colors are like basically like realistic, naturalistic. Wait, is it naturalistic? Ah, shit. Realistic, I think is the right term. And yet, for wanting to be a doctor and a socialist, almost none of that is shown, but we do spend quite some screen time on sex when, like, I appreciated that there were clearly times where she learned from it, but then there were other times where it didn't really seem like, I saw someone say that the movie is hypersexualized or hypersexual, something along those lines, and that's a good way to put it. And again, I don't think that has to be a bad thing in all cases. Like, if that is what the movie is about, but then isn't the movie about Bella coming into her own? Because if by the end the thing she wants is to be a doctor, then why aren't... yeah, I'm starting to repeat myself. I think from this... let's see. I feel like what benefits the video the most now is to try to go into chronological, and I will talk about the characters as we encounter them. Yeah. So I think it worked really well that the very first thing we see is indeed... I knew that that was what had happened, but Bella does not learn until a bit into it. And but yeah, you know, we do see her commit suicide, and then the yeah, being taken out of the water. And yeah, I suppose maybe we are meant to, for a while, think that she hit her head, and that is what is going on. I guess this is a decent enough time to briefly, well, with me, is anything ever brief? I'm going to read... yeah, I'm still working on the vocabulary for it. I'm going to perform a disability reading now. So, at first, we think that she, you know, yeah, Max even uses the R slur. I'm not going to repeat it here. And I noticed, because that is a thing where, you know, there's a lot of movies these days that try to avoid using that term. Undeniably here, it is used in its original meaning. Is, you know, he is clearly not trying to insult Bella. Like, that would be incredibly silly. You know, he's already attracted to her, despite the Wii on the floor, and... or was that slightly after? Certainly he does still end up marrying her, you know. And he's talking to a man who clearly cares about her, you know, so it would be incredibly silly of him, because he's trying to impress Godwin, you know. He's being very polite in the face of... I believe this is after Godwin insulted him and said, "Look, dude, I just need an assistant, okay? You'll do." And let's see. Yeah. At first, it would appear that she has a mental disability. As she develops, she did come across to me as coded as being on the autistic spectrum. Seeing someone in an adult body... and okay, you know, before I say the following, it is very important that I underline I have tremendous love and empathy for, you know, people on the autistic spectrum. I've met dozens. They are just as likely, if not more, in some cases more likely, to be wonderful people as people who are, you know, neurotypical. I frankly, you know, I would say probably a higher percentage of the people on the autistic spectrum that I've encountered have had, you know, understanding towards my ADHD than people who are entirely neurotypical. So what I'm about to say is not meant as insult. But yeah, seeing someone in an adult body, you know, struggle with social norms, you know, breaking things as just like amusement rather than only by accident, and the way that Bella struggles with language, you know, that all felt very much... yeah. And that had me really appreciating the movie does have a significant amount of empathy for her. And I'm not saying necessarily as much as it should. You know, once again, like, some of these sex... like, I do not think we needed to see so many scenes of her clearly not enjoying the sex. And I appreciate also so many scenes where she is enjoying sex does also at some point, like in, they're two different fetishes, kind of, and to be clear, when we talk fetishization, obviously it changes a lot when we also know the character well. You know, a lot of the worst cases of fetishization in media, it is when the character is criminally underdeveloped. Sometimes the character will appear for one scene, engage in something that, yeah, fetish, kink, not necessarily something that the character themselves enjoy. Sometimes they'll just be degraded by another character, but the way it's framed, you can tell, oh, this is someone's kink. This is supposed to attract a very certain audience. And I'm also not kink shaming, to be clear. I'm just saying, that is something that needs to be treated delicately. What people do when everyone present is consenting, I really do not wish to judge. Yeah. But yeah. The movie is celebrating her learning more things. And it contrasts that, and especially how much she learns from other women, with the way the men react to her learning more and seeing the world. By the end of the film, she has encountered 4 men who express positive feelings, perhaps even love of some kind or another, towards her, and all 4 seek to take something from her. Even when Duncan claims that he wants an adventure for them, as soon as he realizes that when she agreed to that, she had no overt intention of only adventuring with him personally, even he locks her up. All 4, by the end, have done or attempted to lock her up. The movie is even bookended by her being locked up by one father figure who brought her body back to life against her wishes, and then there at the end, a man who wishes to father children with her, regardless of her wishes. So that's another thing. I think you could have taken, let's say, 1/5 of the sex scenes and replaced them with scenes where she is in conversation with other women. Because I think every single time she does encounter a woman, there is some kind of knowledge being transmitted. Perhaps not every single individual scene, but in at least one scene she shares with another woman, except perhaps the woman that at the table with at the double date, where Duncan teaches her how to be polite. And I mean, technically, even Margaret Qualley teaches Bella that Prim feels the exact same way about her that she did when Bella left. Or I guess worse, because now she did she call her the W word before? I feel uncomfortable repeating it, but I assume they say it enough in this movie for you to probably know exactly what word I'm referring to. I don't know if I feel qualified to discuss whether or not they use it too much, because there are a couple of, among other things, the fact that they do not use, for example, the term sex worker. you know, it's that term does not have quite the negative, you know, the harshness. An argument can be made that it's in part realistic, and yeah, it just you know, even beyond the word, like look at the tone, the way that they say the word. The men who feel they own Bella, the way they say the W word. And I suppose that does just about... I guess also an element that could be read as Bella perhaps being... To be clear, I'm not saying she literally is on the spectrum. That is a can of worms that I am not. I am... Okay, you know what? I want to spell it out because sometimes people misunderstand me. I am 100% not in any way, shape, form, or fashion saying that someone on the autistic spectrum is the equivalent of an adult body with a baby brain inside. But another aspect that I've noticed pattern is this thing of wandering off, you know, going, you know, being very eager to explore. And I do also appreciate that, you know, these things are also thought of as, well, that's, you know, that's childlike. And I think that is, I guess I'll also just briefly note, so that covers this element of mental disability, or, you know, how one could read it as that. There are, of course, let's see, I forget, was it more than one? There was at least one man who had a physical disability. He had lost one of his hands and had a prosthetic, and because of the time, it does not resemble a hand. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of got the sense that the movie, and certainly Bella, were not really judging him. And that I did think was, you know, I don't know if we needed to see the actual sex act, but it felt like something, you know, the movie is clearly sex positive. You know, we also have the thing about the, right now I'm struggling, wasn't her name Martha, talking about that she hasn't been bedded in 20 years, but she does sometimes use her hand to reach the happy place. And yeah, in these cases, like, I didn't really get the sense that we, the viewer, are supposed to think that there's something wrong with someone with a physical disability or an elderly woman, you know, still having sexual experiences. It felt to me like what the movie was doing was conveying the sort of the way that society views women, because you know, we have that thing about, you know, we also have Swiney talking about, you know, desirability is thought of as something of only young people. Can I just say, I had actually kind of forgotten. I noticed when people talked about it, I had forgotten she was going to be in this, and I'm so happy to get to see her in something again, because ever since Andor, I was like, I need more performances by this woman. She is so unbelievably talented. Like in both of these, it just... if you have a recommendation for something else to watch other than rewatching these, please drop it in the comments, because I just... oh, wow. Yeah. And such different characters as well. But let's see. You know, it's one of those cases where, like, if I didn't know better, like if someone told me, oh yeah, they're twins, you know, I'd be like, well, that explains how, you know, the performances are so different. But no, really, it is just that she's that unbelievably talented. But yeah, so that accounts for the issue of age. And as far as physical disability goes, it felt like that was the movie explaining, well, that's why he goes to a sex worker. A lot of women look at him and think that he must be dangerous. They can't find an appeal, or the fact, that is something that I've heard from disability advocates who themselves have, some a physical disability that is visual, that people can notice. A lot of people, they see that and it makes them uncomfortable and they don't want anything to do with that person. And it's, of course, completely ridiculous. Like, why would someone like that, like, listen, a lot of the people who've done the most damage are specifically like members of the majority, people who don't have something that's like immediately visually thought of as a signifier of danger. And I'm not saying everyone who is conventionally attractive, for example, is dangerous, but it's it's important to acknowledge that at least some are. And if you don't know someone yet, try not to be fooled by their looks. And just to be clear, I'm not like saying, oh, the women are so shallow. No, no, no. Like, that advice goes for men just as well. And I guess that does. I remember, being a teenage boy and like some of the students that were the most conventionally attractive, the other guys, would have an easier time making friends with other guys than those who were not. And yeah, some of them turned out to be just the absolute worst. Anyway, I think that does. But yeah, one thing I certainly noticed was that Duncan did not like the idea. So, and he says the words. He says, "Did you fuck that guy?" With, I don't, I forget if the description is considered offensive, so I'll just, yeah, where the rest of the line goes. So basically, he's been waiting outside, watching the people who go in, and imagining them having sex with Bella. That is very fucked up and stands in quite stark contrast to her consenting to sex work. Like it's very much, and he's someone who himself has had a lot of sex. There's the thing about, like, oh yeah, she said you have the scent of 100 women, and he's like, oh, that's significant. I'm not going to say the number, but it's significantly north of 100. And yet, when a woman does it, suddenly, but he even at one point says, like, okay, I'm being punished because I have had a lot of sex, and just, yeah. I think that does bring us to the, because I do want to get back to the start of the film. So yeah, right at the very start, she can't at first pronounce the word "by." She keeps saying "ba," but she also keeps trying. And the let's see, yeah, she wheezes on the floor and does not show any sign that it was something that, like, bothered her as such, which, again, fits this idea of, the the brain of a toddler. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, it is a proven scientific fact that toddlers have no fear. And we, of course, know this because they will look you right in the eye while taking a shit. But yeah, so we let's see. Yeah, we also have, Godwin doesn't even say anything when she's like smashing plates. Like, it clearly bothers Prim and her unseen twin sister Proper. And yeah, I appreciated how much into something truly fantastical it goes early with the burp bubble and the machine and everything. And let's see, the right, also the thing about how she will put food in her mouth and then spit it out if she doesn't like it. That again resembles a child. Yeah. Anyway, so we have the bit at the Godwin trying to teach, and we have some of the students there. The very classy students will talk about how little they think of Godwin, and Max has praise for him and is told that he is lesser because he doesn't have a suit. And I mean, I tend to hate kind of social exclusion on like no good basis. Like he was making a really good point. Like I feel like the truth is somewhere in the middle. Be careful not to adulate someone who's willing to do things like that. But I don't know. I mean, we do know, of course, that if you're not wearing a suit, then you can't learn anything. Now, that's an obvious joke. I hate these two assholes, and I'm glad they're hardly in the movie. But yeah, the point does come across very nicely. This thing of like essentially, a lot of polite society think that you have to dress a certain way, and let's see, even these upper class people who have money for specific clothes that are that you're supposed to wear in certain circumstance, they can't see past you know the surface with Godwin. But yeah, so Max, he talks to Max after, and we have that exchange about you know you almost reach mediocrity, and then the thing about are you religious? I believe in God. Me or the deity? And yeah, Bella also calls him God, not Godwin, but yeah. And that, of course, once again fits the, that is one of the themes of the Frankenstein story, the God complex of Dr. Frankenstein. And let's see, so we have the right. Apparently, her hitting him in the face was an attempt to draw blood, or she can just she comes close to being able to pronounce, and yeah, that is because he keeps teaching her anatomy. All these things about like she can only cut the dead bodies, and she does very eagerly, and she knows there's blood in there, and she wants to see it. And I do also think that it works. So other than the curiosity, because like the thing is, like there are a lot of children who will be put off by things that are significantly less intense than that, but it goes to, I already mentioned one of the two things that could help explain it, and the other is, we find out there at the end that, at least supposedly, and he's an unreliable narrator, so, Mr. Military could be lying or misinterpreting, but supposedly she shared his love of cruelty. And the fact that she wants to cut She apparently wants to see blood from someone living and has to be told, no, 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 only the dead. That does suggest that maybe there is some of that. And that is, of course, one of the conversations that come up with something like, I feel like, I believe as long as there have been organ transplants, there's been the notion that what if, would some memory come over to, there's like at least one story out there about someone who has a hand transplant and the hands belong to a killer, and so now they want to kill. And yeah, there is something interesting there. I'm once again not really qualified to speak on, how one should go into that. I'm to that subject. I'm merely noting that is some of what's going on here. Like, even though her the actual brain of Victoria was removed entirely, something remains, like maybe muscle memory of cruelty, which does, of course, also help kind of, one of the things with the movie is that because we're told that she has the brain of a baby, even there by the end, it does still feel uncomfortable that she is engaging in, adult activities, including sex. I'm not just using a euphemism, I mean in general, And, yeah. I'm trying to resist the urge to try to rewrite it to be less problematic. I don't think I'm fully qualified to, so I think I will refrain. Now, other than that, so there's some time of just the, Max and Bella developing feelings for each other. I guess this is a good time to just briefly note, fantastic makeup on Willem Dafoe. Just, yeah, and his performance genuinely is, like, yeah. I want to watch more of his indies. I love his mainstream work, but I definitely want to expand my horizon there some. But yeah, yeah. So yeah, when not only is Max, like, he's described later as too cowardly, and yeah, he is someone who struggles to admit and go for the things he wants. And it's worth noting that doesn't really make him less of a misogynist. Over the course of it, we see that, like, he's less, like, open about it, but he is still, as soon as he's told the only way you can marry her is you both never leave, he doesn't even really hesitate. And yeah, the fact that and he says yes to that right after having said, I mean, obviously, we're only going to get married if she consents to it, which also didn't even cross Godwin's mind. He's like, oh, okay, there's two conditions then. Don't talk about Fight Club. No, wait. And, yeah, it is clearly not explained to her that she will never leave if they get married, or she would not have agreed to it. And that is when we also see that, not long after, we have the thing about, it is genuinely funny, the thing about, like, what was it? There's some name of a pastry and then lick all day. At least I hope that was all in one sentence. She's definitely fucking, isn't she? I mean, speaking only for myself, what I got out of that letter was that she is happy and wants you to know about it, which I feel like is a good thing, but because other men have sexual access to her, you literally don't even really register that. You're just, and again, like I talked about, liking the line. One of the things I like about it, it is funny in part also because it shows his insecurity. It really does a great job of that because, like, yeah, genuinely, you know, why do you care that much? Like, she expressed that she's coming back. That it's not like I could kind of understand if they just met and fell in love, and she says she had, she wants him, and then she like sends a John Deere John, sorry. I would be impressed if she managed to transport an entire John Deere to him. Even like it would be very magnanimous, minimus, liminal. But that would take quite some doing. But the yeah, he's just focused on, oh, she's probably having sex, and that again, I can't help but think, wouldn't that have been a fantastic time to cut to her having a deep conversation about socialism? Like, if I recall correctly, it cuts to sex. I believe that is what, yeah, and yeah, like in general, like if about half the time she was accused of sex, it was actually like a deep conversation that she had engaged in, but these men can't imagine that for a woman. I think that would have been an effective way of communicating that. Now, I think that does bring us nicely to, so the yeah, um there's even the thing about, like, there's going to be a legal contract. And yeah, like, genuinely, it's not at all about what she wants. The men who are with her, some will, Duncan tricked her by pretending it was a romantic gesture into being on the boat where he could easier keep an eye on her. And the I mean, ultimately, Mr. Military does come out and say it, but he was also discussing it behind her back. But yeah, in different ways, the men try to control her, and I don't think it's accidental how much of the time what they do is legal. A legal contract that takes away a woman's rights in marriage. Yeah, that was the law for a very long time. And right now, you are seeing Republicans screaming about how awful it is that no-fault divorce is legal. Because they would literally rather, like, I'm sorry, but just following the train of logic, the only way you would want no-fault divorce to be illegal is if you wish, and maybe it's not for you yourself, maybe it's for others, but you want there to be a non-zero number of women who are forced to stay in a marriage because he's not hitting her or something, because he is not doing something that the law would consider, like, yeah. And I'm just going to point out there that, put out there, it has been pointed out by others. Again, I'm afraid I forget the source. The percentage of married women who committed suicide went down a not insignificant percentage when no-fault divorce became legal. Can you even imagine how awful a marriage must be would prefer to die than spend the rest of your natural life in that marriage? Like, just think about that for just a second. You don't have to wallow in it, but I feel like that alone is justification for keeping no-fault divorce legal. And I guess that does bring us to, yeah, so that is when we first meet Duncan. he brought the document, and it doesn't even bother him that he made a bunch of spelling errors. He's just like, no, don't worry, it's still legally binding. And then he excuses himself and even pretends like, oh, I'm afraid I simply cannot, like he stops just short of saying, like, listen, if you force me to stay here, I'm gonna piss on the floor, okay? Like, I know around here that is not frowned upon, but if it's not too much of a bother, may I? And I do quite appreciate that that earns him a not necessarily prostate check, but a reference to maybe he should have that, but he's willing to say something kind of degrading about himself and take the prostate exam remark in good humor just so he can see Bella. And to be clear, I don't personally think that people should feel shame for that sort of thing. I'm just acknowledging a lot of people do. Both the, bladder thing and prostate checks, like, it's something that happens. Like, I've long said we should not shame people who struggle with things like that. We should shame those who attempt to shame them. Now, and only because that in some cases appears to be the only way to get them to stop. Other than that, we should try to convince people with, arguments. And I guess that does bring us to, but yeah, so he starts, going around trying to find her. And almost immediately, he touches her genitalia. And at first, she is put off by the fact that he did not ask for consent, though she's only able to verbalize consent later. But she does, also want that, and yeah, like it is one of those classic things of, well, she's just, she likes Max, but she doesn't really feel intense sexual attraction towards him. And yeah, I did appreciate that they did not go all in on the sound design when she finds herself using foreign objects to stimulate, and that it does not go, the prim stops her almost, or not almost, oh yeah, absolutely, immediately. And let's see. Yeah, also, I couldn't help but notice, no one in that scene even mentions Prim didn't consent to that. They just talk about, oh, it's not polite, So the implication is, if you were behind closed doors, what you just did to her would be considered okay, And again, very childlike, this idea of, wanting someone else to experience something positive that you've just discovered. And yeah, that is one of the reasons why. See, I understand the argument for the sex scenes. I think the fact that there is such childishness. Once again, I'm not trying to rewrite, really, but I think a case could be made that if she was no longer showing any immaturity by the time she started being sexual, that would help tremendously, but really you would probably need more. You'd probably need, like, back to formula in order to really remove how problematic that element is. But yeah, so yeah, he doesn't even understand at first that she cannot open the windows. There's a lock on there, but they can talk on the roof. And there we have a very notable contrast between her talking on the roof with Max and with Duncan. Max insists we're not allowed up there. And Duncan, when indicated, oh, go up on the roof, absolutely. Both of them are attracted to her, keeping that in mind. And then, you know, yeah, she slides down the roof, and Max carefully uses the whole step things. And yeah, Duncan lays it out, and she does agree, not appreciating how awful he's going to turn out to be. Which I think I'm just going to briefly take this time to... So let's see, I've talked about Godwin some, I've talked about Max, a tiny bit about Prim. Duncan. Ruffalo based his performance in part on Andrew Tate. Mark, I know you're not watching, but thank you. That is the choice. That just yeah. And he described this as having 1 foot slipping on a banana peel and the other foot in the grave. And yeah, absolutely. Like I think he might be my favorite male performance. I don't think I even have to say the words, but obviously my favorite female performance is Emma Stone's. But yeah, it's 100% spot on. I loved hating Duncan. And he's also someone that just like, as soon as he sneaks into Bella's room, we immediately feel like, this fucking asshole, you know. He doesn't ask, would it be okay? And he already knows that, like, you know, he doesn't respect her autonomy there. I mean, an argument could be made he does later when he asks her to come on this, but maybe that's just because it's easier than if you were to, like, kidnap her, which he sort of does later. He even calls it kidnapping himself for the boat. But he also does not respect the men who are telling him. You know, he already knows, okay, so this guy is sort of like the father, and he's saying, you know, she's supposed to be married to this other guy. They don't want me to do this. Because it's one of those things where, you know, technically, like, did they say directly? No, but they didn't say he could. Like, generally, both. If you are in someone else's home, you should ask permission before going into a place that they're not, like, leading you into or telling you, hey, you know, mi casa es su casa. And he doesn't ask permission because he knows not only would he not get it, he would probably be told to fuck off. They'll find another solicitor, you know. They'll solicit another solicitor, frankly. But I guess that does bring us to the good detail on the somewhat childlike handwriting on the postcards. And yeah, so they are, let's see, I think Lisbon is where they start, if I recall correctly. Oh, right, I did also quite like the part where one of the reasons that Bella likes Max is that he teaches her things that clearly Godwin was not, or, you know, else she'd be asking him, you know. But and she wants to leave, she wants to travel, and knowing that, he agrees to a contract that would prevent her from that for life. I forget if that's after he found out that for ease, I will refer to, I'll say Victoria when I'm talking about, you know, before. Yeah, before the suicide, she was Victoria. She suicided, and she was pregnant, and now they're talking about, like, oh, well, let's get her married then, and let's make sure she's locked up. I do really want to underline, I appreciate how much the movie does to criticize misogyny and patriarchy, because it clearly has a lower opinion of misogynistic men than of women just trying to exist in the world. I mean, what is the worst thing that a woman... It would probably, in this movie, the worst, swiney, I would argue, is the woman who says and does the worst things. And she has a grandchild that she has to take care of, so we can kind of understand. Yeah, I'm not making excuses for the biting, the sort of beauty vampirism thing she does. Now, let's see, but yeah, with that said, it is also the case that if you're gonna have this much female sexuality in a movie, then, you're really gonna have to make huge efforts for it to not come across as if you are saying that women are... shit, I'm starting to repeat myself again, but yeah, that women are defined by sex, rather than that's how a lot of men seek to define them. I'll give you one for free. You could have a scene where she literally is told, oh, hey, this guy, he's going to go above 30 francs. He wants to pay you 60. And she says, go away, I'm reading. Anyway, let's see. I think Lisbon, he tries to get her food that she likes, and they have a lot of sex, and he starts being uncomfortable as soon as there's any kind of, so let's see, there was this one guy who, there was something about chess, and he wanted to see her thighs, and then he performed cunnilingus on her, and that bothers, that's part of the reason why Duncan kidnaps her. And yeah, I have to say I am such a mark for scenes like the one where, he specifically tells her, from now on, 3-line vocabulary. We are upgrading the Whose Line Is It Anyway game. You're allowed to say, how delightful, how do they get these crisps, so something along those lines, those sorts of things. And so when this woman talks about, like, there's something about someone who had died or was about to die that she cared about, and so Bella says, how delightful, how do you think they get these crisps? So, Duncan, you did this, you're the one who did this. She has shown that she is capable of relating to other people to at least some degree. You told her 3-line vocabulary, just, I love, and it's just like instant comeuppance. Anyway, I believe that does... Let's see. Yeah, the dancing was also phenomenal. I love the way that I'm new to talking about dancing, but I believe the right way to phrase it is she leads, something along those lines, because she's the one, and she's like got him in this almost sort of chokehold, which, like, that's not accidental. That is her saying, you're smothering me, I want to, do that to you. And he keeps attacking everyone that, like, winks at her, to the point where he at first isn't even really participating in the dance, and just, yeah, he, like, he is essentially a male ego with legs, like there's no other... Yeah, he seems incapable of deeper thought. He wants her, or at least he wants her to not be with those that she would rather be with than him. So the next thing I think is the, let's see, right, I also quite appreciated the way that so Godwin is very laissez-faire, not necessarily about the hats, and yeah, Duncan expects her to behave in a very certain way, even though she's not shown any proclivity towards doing so. And he gets physically abusive with her when she does not. He said he wanted this, and when he gets it, that's how he reacts. And there are a lot of misogynistic men that behave exactly like that. I really think it's he is conventionally attractive, Mark Ruffalo, and silver tongue and all. Yeah, there are a lot of men out there like that, and there are a number of feminist women trying to convey, hey, be careful, do not fall for that. Which is, of course, part of why the manosphere hate feminist women. Remember I want to say it's called the T app? Yeah, the downfall of that was very telling about how misogynistic men felt about just the truth being out there about misogynistic men. Now, I think that is when so there's several times where, he is frustrated that she's not there when he wakes up. And we have that thing about, like, he says, like, even he can't fuck her more than thrice. And so he falls asleep, and yeah, she goes to find someone else because she's realized that this makes her feel good. And, there is a point there about, like, he wants to, like so many other misogynistic men, control a woman's sexuality rather than, like, because the thing is, like, I get, if he's not interested in an open relationship, not everyone is. I personally, I mean, I'm not gonna go out and engage in a romantic relationship again, but the two I had were monogamous. If I were ever to again, yeah. But I do not shame anyone who participate in non-monogamy as long as it's ethical. And yeah, something I've heard, I believe every single person on YouTube that I've encountered that is part of ethical non-monogamous pairing is that it's not for everyone, and you shouldn't feel pressured into it, because then it is not healthy, So I'm not saying that he should willingly engage in, but one thing is that he just kind of assumes that she will, because it's like, she was about to get married, and you, like, convince her to go with you. Why would she be monogamous with you when she specifically already said, but that's, he didn't really care about what she did after he was expecting to have a lot of sex with her and then just, stop communicating with her, probably, ghost her, I think is the term. And yeah, he assumes that she's going to, despite, she's already agreed to not be monogamous with her fiance. And what's that? The room quote? Soon to be husband, I guess. Anyway, the one thing is the assumption, and also, like, I'm just gonna come out and say it. If I was with a woman, and I'm not saying that one of the, you know what? I'm just not touching. I'm just saying hypothetically. You know what would be good if you are in a relationship with a woman and she, after you have had sex together, she expresses that she would like more, as some women do, and that's not, like, wrong. That's just something that, like, you know, misogynists under patriarchy say because they like to control women. Maybe, if you are not comfortable with ethical non-monogamy, maybe suggest a toy. Those exist. And I appreciate some men are actually like, oh, but that's like replacing me. You think that's all you have to... Oh my God, you do, don't you? You think that's all you have to offer a woman. And then you wonder why, after a while, when a woman realizes that, she's not necessarily so interested in being in a relationship with you anymore. Because of what... I mean, that basically... See, the thing is, if you go into a long-term relationship with a woman, if you think that the only thing you can offer her is sexual pleasure, not only are you saying that you yourself are not very impressive and, confidence is attractive, you're kind of also saying that that's all she'll ever need from her partner, which is also insulting towards her. Anyway, that does bring us to the yeah, that is one of the times, so yeah, she comes back and he's like, you disappeared. And then she says, no, I didn't. I left. Can somebody just disappear? And that's one of the times where he says, what the fuck are you even saying? Which is funny on its face. Because what she's saying is actually very, very, like, it's difficult for her to be more clear in what she's trying to communicate there. What you mean to say, and what I've noted a number of, I swear I'm not trying to, like, go after the neurotypicals. There's a lot of you that are wonderful. But I've noted neurotypicals will be like, what? When what they mean is, why? Like, listen, it's fine if you're like, wait, why are you saying that now? But, like, if one of us, like, I as someone with ADHD, sometimes my brain will just jump to something else. And someone will say, what? Right after I said something that literally could not be any clearer, like not under any circumstances whatsoever. And what you mean is, why are you saying that now? And if you just ask, hey, why are you saying that now? Yeah, well, I'd like to think I have the confidence to just say, oh, sorry. Train of thought, jump tracks. What were we talking about? But when you just say, what? That kind of shuts down communication. Anyway, I don't know, maybe some of them, that's what they want. But yeah, let's see, I think that does bring us nicely to, yeah, so he says, I'll take you on an adventure, and then let's see, right, and also, I think, I think that might be the scene where he says, how do you know, oh wait, that's like, whatever, I'll do it here. Who are you? How do you know those words but not these concepts? Do you think you maybe should have tried to find that out about her before doing this whole thing? Because he keeps blaming her for things she says and does that if he had spent more time with her, he would have known that that's who she is. But he doesn't see her as a person. He just assumes that all women are basically the same, and all he has to do is wave his magic wand. And yes, I'm talking about what you think I'm talking about. And they're going to fall under his spell, and he can use them for a while and then just get rid of them. And the idea that a woman would have a personality, an individuality, is so foreign to him that he literally starts just like, he's at times barely coherent. Like, he's just, and I also noticed he really started increasing his use of the word fuck and variations thereof, which it's such a great way to get across, because while I personally appreciate the diversity of the word, I do... that was the wrong accent for that, whatever. I I'm also well aware that some people will use it just because they don't know what else to say, and that is very much what's going on here. He also uses the C word on more than one occasion, I recall. But yeah, so he tells her, adventurer, just get into this, this yeah, bag, I guess. And yeah, she does. And at first she just thinks they're in another hotel. Okay, what's the big deal? But they're on a boat. They're on a boat. Look at them, everybody. They're on a boat. And immediately she identifies what happened. You trapped me. She is not fooled for a fraction of a second. She knows this was not for her benefit. It was for his. And as soon as she starts talking to new people, he can't handle it. I love the bit with, where he's called on, like, she's not allowed to have friends? Because this isn't even sex. He's not even angry that she's having sex with a stranger anymore. He's angry that he can't control where she goes and what she does. He basically just wants her to only go out with him. Like, he's angry that she even left their hotel room without him. He immediately assumes, because, like, listen, I'm sorry. If I wake up and I realize, oh, my partner left, and then she comes back, my first, words are not like, what are you doing? Why would you leave? It's just like, did the errand go well? I assume you had, there was something out there that you needed to do. I didn't need to be awake for. Did it go well? Great. Let's eat. But he, like so many other misogynistic men, he just wants to own her. And the fact that he doesn't at no point leads him to just accept that it's not going to happen, at least, at all. Like, he's willing to transfer it onto Mr. Military, but someone has to own this woman. Someone has to tame her in his mind. I guess that does pretty much cover. Yeah, what was the other? Yeah, so yeah, that's, yeah, so she talks to Martha, and I'm very sorry. My researchers are looking it up right now, and I do not remember what the cynic's name was. But yeah, that was great, and oh my god, that part where she's reading a book, and so Duncan takes it, flings it into the ocean, and then I think is another one. He flings it away. At her most childlike, keeping in mind she pissed on the floor and had and announced it but did not seem bothered by it, she was never as immature as he's being right then and there. And that, again, it's such a great visual metaphor. He would rather these ideas, like, he doesn't even, for all he knows, these are like the only copies of these two books in existence. He would rather they be lost forever than their ideas take hold in the mind of a woman that he claims to love. That is such a perfect way to convey that. And not very long after, he expresses that he wants to fling Martha into the ocean. Because she is broadening Bella's mind. And then Bella says that she dares him to. Now, I am not certain if she knew that it wouldn't work, but either way, this does appear to be some of the lingering cruelty of Victoria. And, at the time I thought, oh, she does have the capacity for cruelty. I wasn't thinking about whether or not it was part of Victoria, but in retrospect, I think that is what it's supposed to be. And I couldn't help but notice he's not even on the right deck to be throwing her off. Like, if he threw her off the edge there, she would land on the deck right below them. And yeah, Martha is like, this should be fun. And I forget who said it, but someone was like, I don't know, maybe she. Oh, I think, yeah, this is, the cynic was like, She sounds like she's into it. Go for it, buddy. And she hits him right in the face with the cane handle, I think it is, which once again, like, doesn't look comfortable. I can think of at least one way that he would have avoided that happening. Stop using violence to solve all your fucking problems, buddy. And yeah, some of the crew show up and drag him off, and a good time was had by all except him, I think. And let's see, yeah, I think the next thing is the what I've heard described as the titular poor things, the dead down in the and we have the cynic shows her those, and this is not very long after we had a joke that maybe put us at ease, and then sorry about I need to not move so much so the autofocus doesn't fuck up. He shows her that, and it genuinely is horrifying looking, and I appreciate, like, we're not laughing. Like, I didn't even laugh when she bit his hand, which once again is somewhat childlike thing to do, and he has to like drag her away from there, really struggles to keep her from going there. Yeah, it was genuinely something. It's uncomfortable. Very nicely done on that. And right, and she I think it might have been slightly before that she talks to earlier she didn't want to go with Duncan, now she does, and he's like, drinking hard, losing a lot. Have you considered not continuing playing if you're losing? And to be clear, I'm not trying to like shame people who have an actual gambling addiction, but that is the only time in the movie we see him actually gamble. So best I can tell, he's basically, it's like that thing about, if you can't get the first thing you want, you'll find like the next best thing, which is, of course, what they do. Godwin and Max with Margaret Qualley, who I swear, no matter how little screen time you give her, she makes an impression. This is the least I've seen her have screen time in anything, but yeah, here she's also amazing in The Substance and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a movie that I don't even overall love. I think it's Tarantino's weakest, personally. The Substance I do mostly love, but I already did a video on it, so I'm not going to reiterate. Yeah, now he does not want to go with. And once again, like, listen, she's trying to make up, she's saying, maybe with, right. Also, like, the thing, before, I think it's got to be before they get on the boat, where she's like, what about the genital licking? Is that no longer happening? True. It is no longer happening. And let's see, so she later finds him, passed out drunk on the bed. He didn't even put the money away, which right there could certainly have helped. But he is so proud of the fact that he earned, he got all this money. Like, as best I can tell, he must have been like throwing them in the air. Like, he can't just have been like carrying them in his hands, right? Because it feels like they're too all over the room for it to just be that. As best I can tell, he was like lying on the bed, throwing them in the air, like, look at how amazing I am, and then passed out. And then so she goes up and gets the, all the money, not just what he won, but also what he had before. And she's going to give it to the poor, but they're, we're leaving though, and they're like, we could give it to them for you, which also, that's one of those things of like, these two definitely do not make or have as much money as Duncan, and they need it more than he does. And so while I obviously don't approve of stealing from someone who's literally saying they want it to be given to the poor, I do also appreciate, like, they would probably think, well, anyone who can afford a ticket on this thing is an asshole who deserves to lose everything, you know. But yeah, and so she comes back, and the oh, I think that's also, isn't that when the we have the thing about the cynic saying, you know, it was cruel of him. He didn't like that she was so innocent, and that is, of course, like, the way he talks, he's essentially a doomer, you know. I'm not saying you have to believe in socialism, but if you believe in far left ideology as little as capitalism, I'm afraid that's going to limit our conversational, yeah. Anyway, the and yeah, she says she is grateful that she learned, and that, again, like, that was a really good, I appreciate this thing of, like, that contrast again, the way that she is glad to be learning more, and he considers it bad form to be, you know, he feels he went too far, but she is actually, you know, very, like, she's stimulated in a way other than sexually, which, again, I think the movie should have had at least some more of the non-sexual stimulation, to be clear. And yeah, you know, it is the let's see. Yeah, so she tells him that we weren't robbed. I gave our money to the, you know. And so he's like, okay, fine, don't bring the captain. Is that what it's called? And then, you know, he comes back, he's like, what the fuck? I just told you not to bring the captain. And then the captain says, so you can't afford us anymore, can you? And the way the power dynamic just shifts in no time at all. Wonderful. And I can't help but notice Duncan was being a real asshole to this guy. He was yelling at him even before. You know, he didn't start yelling at him when he brought the captain, which is already wrong, but he was being an asshole. I think everyone who's encountered him, you know, like, who knew that this guy was an asshole? Everyone on the boat. Everyone not on the boat. And yeah, what was it? They're confined to cruise rations rather than getting to eat the fancy stuff. That yeah, and didn't he also say confined to quarters until, and they'll be, you know, as soon as they get to the nearest harbor, they'll be let off. You know, so yeah, and later he says, you know, it's been weeks since they needed to use money, and she's like, it's for an emergency, and it's not my money, it's Garwin's money. And yeah, just love that critique of capitalism. You know, Duncan for so long has been able to get away with being a complete asshole, and that's because he has money, and capitalism values money over anything else, including human life in many cases. And when you don't have that money, that is yeah. And once again, like, imagine if he had been just super fucking nice, if he was constantly tipping big time, and everyone working on the boat liked him, and they found out, oh, he can't afford more. Shit. Maybe they don't tell the captain, or maybe they tell the captain but make sure that he appreciates, listen, this is like, you would be throwing away, like, literally the best fucking passenger we have had on this boat ever, you know. But the yeah, because, like, I'm just gonna put out there, hypothetically, if maybe they need money to cover for him, but he can't pay it. If he's a really good person and they actually like his company, maybe they take a little bit of extra from some of the other from the asshole passengers, and just say, oh, we're so sorry, but the prices did increase. Maybe you should have read the fine print. I'm not saying that a good deed is not its own reward. I'm just saying tax the rich. Anyway, I believe that does bring us nicely to the part where they... So yeah, they end up in Paris on the out in the cold, and I mean, we already knew that Duncan was the fucking worst. But then he threatens the dog. Like, what an absolute... Jesus Christ. And let's see. I guess that does cover the... I guess I'll very briefly note, so earlier in the almost baby punching scene, which is also like small children will sometimes punch if they don't like a specific noise. So that's, yeah, I'm glad that she was prevented. But they're discussing a play, and they mention Wild, and there was, what was it? Something about a bag or something like that. So they are discussing the importance of being earnest, which if you've never watched, you are missing out. Like, I actually don't think I've ever watched bad Wild. Adaptations, sure, bad adaptations of Wild, but my God, his way with words, fantastic, And, yeah, that play is in part about men lying to women, and how honesty is a very, very different, somewhat rare thing, perhaps especially in polite society. And I appreciated how many times they said words like polite and polite society. And I also believe that is what gets us to at least one of the flashbacks after Margaret Qualley enters the picture, literally. And yeah, that thing about how now Godwin is showing no positive feelings towards the woman that he's brought back. And he keeps saying, oh, just an experiment. Maybe I got too much chloroform into my system, but yeah, he's upset. He lost someone he cared about. And not only does he do the same thing that he already knows, like she ended up wanting to leave, and now he's doing the same thing to another person, and he's not even treating this one well. Like he insists that is science, And I will, as someone who loves science, I believe so many, I'm not saying all, but many of the problems we face can be solved. Climate change can. I'm not going to pretend like, I appreciate, I don't know if misogyny can, for example. I think that requires other means than new discoveries. I mean, as far as like, what's it called? Physical science kind of thing, but a windmill is not going to stop misogyny. But the might slow down Graysdale Plays, though, who I'm not calling a misogynist, just to be clear. Anyway, actually don't know. I'm not 100% certain about his politics. I've heard him make both comments about Biden and Trump, so anyway, which is fine. Not everybody has to put their politics on full display. Anyway, yeah, I'm willing to acknowledge if one approaches science without ethics, yes, essentially what, we can end up with, perhaps not literally what we see in this film for obvious reasons, but yeah, you might end up with someone not really thinking about, because I feel like the least you can do if you're going to, do these experiments is show tremendous empathy towards the subjects, as Max does, and encourages Godwin to do. Now, I think that does bring us to the yeah, so in Paris, yeah, she says, and she acknowledges that she made a mistake. Love to see it. This is a progressive channel. We support women's rights and women's wrongs. She made a mistake, you know. But she also acknowledges, there was a point where she goes, this conversation has taken a frightfully circular turn. She's right. He's just constantly insulting her as like, we're not getting anywhere. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Do you want to solve it, or do you just want to rage at her? Just like, I get that he's frustrated, but do you want to focus on trying to solve the problem, or not? And like, that's the thing. What if she hadn't had all that Godwin money? What the fuck would he even have done? But yeah, so he becomes completely helpless as soon as he loses his money. And there are so many rich people out there who genuinely don't know what to do if their money can't solve a problem. They become just like I mean, I do not comprehend this. Are you sure I cannot pay my way out of this? And I guess that does bring us nicely to so she goes to Swiney and is told, you can make 30 francs. And so she does, and buys something delicious with it. And once again, he's being such a fucking baby. He tosses it away. It's like, and I get it. I understand that it's because he hates the idea that she is in control of her own sexuality and is getting something out of it that is not an orgasm delivered by him. But it's so ridiculous, And I really appreciate. Like, she's so much better at pointing out his flaws than than he is at pointing out hers, and understanding her at all. Once again, there are multiple times where he says, "What?" and the answer is, either obvious or, "Why didn't you make sure that you knew about that before?" Like, when you're meeting a new person, like, assume that, essentially pretty much anything that could be true of a stranger could be true of them. Like, no matter how attractive or unattractive you find them personally, try to look beyond that, And yeah, she's always actually trying to understand, where he will just rage at how he doesn't understand, and he feels like because that's also a thing. There's a lot of misogynistic men. When they realize they don't understand a woman, they feel like it's a personal attack. Like, I am smarter. Like, they think that any man is by definition smarter than any woman. And as such, if a woman expresses something that the man does not understand, they perceive that as like a personal slight. And like, I'm just gonna say, in my personal experience, when a woman says something, when women have said something to me that I didn't immediately understand, they weren't trying to make fun of me. They were trying to help me. They're trying to broaden my mind, Now, I believe that does bring us to, so she makes it her career, and I appreciated that she learns consent and tries to put that on the like, Swiney comes right out and says, listen, there's some men out there who will pay more if the woman does not like it, which is sadly, that is true. Now, I think that does bring us to the I love that immediately, as soon as she meets this woman, because she's a socialist, so she believes in sharing. Sharing is caring. She tells her, as soon as it's over, say, what was it, magnifique? It was some, it was French for like, oh, amazing, and so she does, and it's well received, and let's see. I've already said what I had about the man with the physical disability. I guess I'll very briefly note. So yeah, the thing about the guy saying, "Oh, they are a, they're old enough for sex ed, so this is how." I mean, sadly, there was a time where it was not appreciated that, yeah, children. There's a certain age. I do not remember it, but these two boys definitely have not reached it. Before that, um, someone should not see, sex acts, especially like in person, like in sex ed. There's a reason why it tends to be like diagrams and words rather than seeing. Yeah. Anyway, I guess that does bring us to the. Yeah, there's at least one more thing that I really wanted to make sure to say. So it is. Right, I really appreciated the point where she does not like the smell of that one guy, and so after that she says, "Why don't you tell me a childhood memory? I'll tell you a joke. I'll give you a sniff, if need be, rose oil, and then we can have sex, and it will improve the experience." And it seemed to have that effect. He seemed to like recounting a childhood memory. He laughed at her joke, and didn't even need the rose oil. Sniff wasn't too bad. And that is just, once again, such a perfect, like, I really do appreciate how Lanthimos, so I can't say which of them, but yeah, there's three to choose from. I'm just going to say there at least one of the other movies that I've mentioned watching by Lanthimos also explores consent and how some of the time it is more something that a number of misogynistic men will disregard, and a number of women, as soon as they learn about it, will try to actually, yeah. And to be clear, I am not saying we're not doing gender essentialism. That is complete bullshit. I'm talking about socialization. Women are socialized to become better communicators and more respectful towards others' boundaries. And I appreciate also that part of that is that that's deemed necessary. And there's this idea that, women should, teach these things to men, which, like, it's really, it's way too much pressure to put on women. Not because I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm saying it shouldn't be their responsibility. Boys should learn that as children. And I guess that, and just to be clear, like, that is literally, I don't remember the last time I even came across a female feminist who did not think that, men and boys should be taught consent, communication, respect. I know some people seem to think, why do feminist women only want boys to be aggressive? What are you talking about? That's patriarchy. That's capitalism. It's moving on. I believe that does pretty much cover the yeah, so that we have the one that we have the point. Oh my god. Bella, can't you hear me, Yella? And she's just like, go away. What the fuck are you doing? And he keeps, and as soon as she leaves the building as well, you know, when they, he keeps approaching her when she clearly doesn't want, and she points out, I thought you were leaving. Didn't you go home? And I was hoping. And he says, oh, but I can't go without you. And he's immediately vacillating between, I love you so much, and you fucked that guy, didn't you? So that's something you should probably work on. Like, once again, I appreciate, I understand you can get jealous, but like, obviously this is threatening behavior, you know, like there's this sense that any minute now he is going to, you know, maybe physically attack her or something. And, you know, they say, we're on, you know, I forget which of them say it, but one of them says, you know, we're on a way to a socialist meeting. And he calls them the W word because that's all he can see, you know, is that they are having sex outside of monogamy, even though he himself is not monogamous, but he thinks any woman should be. Any woman he desires, at least, should be. And we also have the line about, you know, we are our own means of production. So she does even read theory. And I guess that does bring us to, yeah, I appreciated the part where, you know, she said when she's nostalgic, she goes to these, you know, learning kind of things with the autopsy thing. And that is, of course, one indication that maybe she does want to become a doctor. I think that might actually pretty much get us to the, let's see. Yeah, I believe that gets us to the, let's see. So there's the bit with, yeah, she sent there's the postcard. And, oh, right. I think, isn't it around here that Max goes to, so, yeah, I think maybe to find out how to contact her so they can communicate that Godwin is dying. And, yeah, we have the, what's it called? Yeah, you know, Duncan is really struggling. And, yeah, I mean, he is obsessed with Bella and can't really seem to drop that. And that's, you know, again, it's, if he had gotten to know her first and it had been about more than like sexuality, you know, there's a lot of evidence that points to that he would have an easier time letting go when she no longer wants him. I appreciate it also, it takes emotional maturity in general, and I'm not saying that you're like an awful person if you're struggling to let go. What I would say is, please make a sincere effort. You know, if the other person does not want you, don't push it. Now, the yeah, and so they you know, she receives that and goes home. And I will say, the way Prim taught the Margaret Qualley character to pronounce Bella, so it sounds like it includes the W word, that does feel like something Prim would do. And yeah, I appreciated the thing about, you know, you're sick, I'm dying. As a doctor, I appreciate the difference and distinction. And yeah, you know, she is now willing to marry Max. And that is when the, yeah, and so they're about to, yeah, they're trying to proceed with, oh, right, oh my God, the part where Godwin, you know, God, you're walking. And he goes over like 3 different things, and the cocaine, it's because he's partial to cocaine. And I was half expecting a line in there about like, you know, I've got this terrible runny nose, but every time I take cocaine, it seems to go away. Is that too obscure of a reference? Maybe that's too obscure of a reference, even for me. Anyway, I think that does bring us to, yeah, so the, you know, the objection part comes in, and Duncan explains how, well, you know, there was that woman who recognized, you know, Victoria, so I put your picture in with the name Victoria, and it's, yeah, he's such a fucking asshole, I swear. Jesus Christ. And yeah, Mr. Military makes his objection, and I did appreciate that it is because she says she wants to go with. But that does also mean she is temporarily locked up in there, which she did not consent to, and yeah, so she goes with, and he very quickly goes from talking about how much he loves her to using the H word in reference to her pregnancy. I know some women do develop a depression during pregnancy, and I appreciate that technically it's realistic for him to use that word. But not long after, we find out his staff hate him, and then why, and then see just how fucking terrible he is. And I appreciate, it. So I already mentioned that he is basically the military personified, and we see that in... He wears all the medals, basically all the time. Why would you wear that around the house? How fucking insecure are you? Okay, the people present are your staff and your wife. Late in more ways than one. Do any of them need to see your medals, or do they maybe know? Because, listen, if you're... There are contexts where I can understand wearing the medals, And he also uses violence and cruelty very casually, essentially as a matter of course, and just to have fun. And it also, if all you have is a gun, everything looks like a target, basically. There's not really anything that he doesn't seem willing to shoot. And it ends up, listen, the guy's so eager to get his gun off, he shoots himself in the foot. Literally. And let's see. That does bring us to the... But yeah, and we, that's when we get the note about how, the cruelty and the yeah, he seeks to remove her sexual pleasure. He doesn't even want to give her sexual pleasure when he is impregnating her. He is going to impregnate her after that, which, I'm not saying that, as long as it's non-consensual, obviously it's wrong, but I don't know. I feel like at that time they already knew that removing, scientifically speaking, removing the parts that give sexual pleasure does not, just doesn't cause an abortion or something, that's a very different, you know what, frankly, there are men today who don't understand that, so maybe I'm giving Mr. Military too much credit there, but yeah, and once she reveals she knows, he doesn't even try to hide it anymore or talk her into it. He's just like, here's a gin with, chloroform, which is just... I'm not sure I remembered, but I did really appreciate her, knocking it back into his face. And yeah, he got just enough chloroform that he couldn't help shoot himself in the foot, and, then passes out. Did she drag him the whole way? Is it terrible to imagine that maybe she just strapped him into the back of a carriage, possibly with the help of his servants? I don't know. I'm not saying I would want that to happen in real life, but, this fucking character. Anyway, that does bring us to... So let's see, the very, very ending. I think I've said all I had about... I am just real quick going to mentally fast forward through the entire thing to see... Yeah, I did appreciate the fact that, yeah, the reason Godwin is so callous and does these experiments is to try to figure out why was his own father such an asshole. And we also have the origin of, she says monsters. You are monsters, and maybe also you're making monsters. You're creating something unnatural here with these brain transplants. Unwilling, unwitting, yeah. But we also find out that's what she said of the baby that he was trying to force her to have. And let's see. I think that does. Yeah, I'm just gonna put it out there. Like, I appreciate that, by the end, she's not forced to be a mother, but she is, going to become a doctor. Could she have become a doctor a little earlier? And then we see her, proving herself and struggling against, because, I mean, so much of the movie is already about her proving herself, but so much of the time it is not so much, like, it's tied directly to her, like, developing as a person, becoming, more aware and such. And frankly, so much of it is explored through her reactions to sex. And, like, I appreciate that there is a degree of empowerment to the fact that she is choosing sex most of the time. Like, there's fairly little in this film that is explicitly that someone else, yeah, does something sexual to her or with her. But of course that is complicated by this idea that that's a child's, at the start, an infant's brain, but when she starts exploring her sexuality, it's, she I wouldn't necessarily say toddler still, but certainly a child, not teenager, certainly not adult, in the way that she talks and her degree of understanding of the world around her, Yeah, so I think that does cover everything. Okay, I swear I'm not going to take forever. Just real quick, going to go over. I liked reading the IMDb trivia. That's well worth your time, in my opinion. And I am still going to watch more Lanthimos after this. And I guess that does pretty much... Let's see, I feel like there's one more thing that I wanted to say. But what was it? We have the meats? No. Yeah, I think that might just about cover the different I think when they showed the perhaps Chichel, Poor Things, they did a really great job of like, we could clearly tell what was going on, but there was also not, like, it didn't just drown us in it either. And, the cynic Doomers, he claims, if we went down there, they would rope us, rob us, and rape us, and we couldn't blame them, and we would do the same in their condition, and that is, like, I understand why. I would note, not everyone who's in a really desperate situation is willing to do such horrible things, especially to people trying to help them. But once again, he is meant to, they specifically say he's a cynic, and I add doomer. Yeah. Right. I thought I really appreciate the way that Godwin relayed, relayed the ways he had been experimented upon. The thing about, like, my father removed that thing because he wanted to see if we needed. Turns out we do. And so now he needs to be hooked up to this thing. That was also pretty funny, the thing about, like, oh, look, he breathes blood. He's got cancer, you fuck. Oh. Oh my god, Duncan. Just, like, wow. Anyway, I believe that does pretty much bring us to the but yeah, we've got the part where, yeah, the long scientific explanation, and what? I'm a eunuch. And also the part where he talks about, his father, what his father did to his nethers. you know, at one point, which, yeah, I mean, that of course raises the universal question. Shit, that's too... Okay, never mind. Fuck. I'm gonna have to real quick think of a less fucked up joke, because that's not ending on that one. Anyway, I need to get better at deciding that before I start talking. Anyway, yeah, I the next time I am feeling down, I am going to replay parts of this movie wherein Bella is calm, collected, and concise in communication, contrasting with Duncan, just, you know, completely incapable of changing himself for the better, because it was truly hilarious, and especially knowing that it was partially based on Andrew Tate.